Qala is a 2022 Bollywood film that is possibly the first of its kind in Indian cinema to explore the topic of abusive mother-daughter relationships and its effect on mental health. Set in the period of pre-independence India in the 1930s and 1940s, at its core, the film revolves around the tumultuous mother-daughter relationship between Qala, a beautiful and famous upcoming female singer in 1940s India, and her domineering and dismissive mother Urmilla. This film, from the mind of writer and director Anivita Dutt, who wrote and directed the classic 2020 Netflix film Bulbul, is aesthetically beautiful and tragic. Anivita Dutt stated in an interview that her films are aesthetically beautiful while discussing such darkness and despair experienced by women for a reason. Qala is another film by this genius writer and director where beauty cuts deep and is a perfect example of what happens when women tell women's stories. In this video, we discuss in various parts the genius of Qala that explores themes such as abusive mother-daughter relationships, mental health challenges of women, loneliness and abandonment, men in positions of power and their abuse of that power, and nepotism versus raw talent. We also explore the symbolism and rich visuals of Qala. Despite being a film set in a particular time period, the topics that this film deals with is relevant today and to today's audience. The mother wound, although not discussed in film as much as its alternative, refers broadly to the generational pain inherited and passed down between mothers and daughters caused by the patriarchal society in which we live. It is considered as a form of complex intergenerational trauma. Women live in a deeply misogynistic world, and this plays out in their roles as grandmothers, mothers, and daughters in various ways. If women fail to challenge these toxic messages, each generation will be burdened by them. The concept of the mother wound is depicted fully in Qala. Throughout the film, we see Urmilla belittle Qala and emotionally and possibly physically abuse her. Qala, as a result, suffers deeply and is constantly hoping for her mother's approval. She becomes increasingly lonely, and this affects her deteriorating mental health even more. Urmilla is the other half of this film's complex and complicated mother-daughter duo. In mainstream Bollywood films, the devoted mother-son archetype or father-son dynamic is endlessly portrayed. It is not unsurprising that Bollywood mothers have generally been portrayed as those who are only devoted fully to their families. In many instances, they are submissive and have no dreams or personality outside their duty to their family. But Qala is a film that turns that concept on its head. In Qala, we ask, what trauma has Urmilla herself experienced? Urmilla is an abusive mother. Her complex relationship with her daughter can be difficult to watch at times. It is also apparent that Urmilla has misogynistic views. In this scene with a young Qala, she tells her that she could be just as good as any male musician. But Urmilla also mentions that she must not be a courtesan. Urmilla does not explain further, and it's clear that the young Qala does not fully understand her mother's words. Furthermore, Urmilla essentially elevates Jagan's importance in her life once she finds him. Discarding her initial project, Qala, Jagan becomes the son that Urmilla lost. And finally, this scene. When she finds out that her mother wants her to be married, Qala asks to stay with her. Urmilla responds, the son stays with the mother, the daughter stays with her husband. Urmilla tends to center men and their importance in her life. This begs the question, what trauma has Urmilla herself experienced? We do not gain any insight into Urmilla's past, but her mental state is clearly disturbed from our introduction to her. This is Urmilla's introductory scene, and it is extremely traumatic. Urmilla is informed that one of her babies, Qala's twin, has died. The doctor informs her that the baby that died was a son and that Qala ingested the nutrients of the other baby. This loss has a monumental effect on Urmilla's mental health and, inevitably, her relationship towards Qala. In the scene that follows, we can only draw inferences, in which Urmilla focuses on the empty crib while ignoring Kala's cries, lifting a pillow to suggest the worst. Did Urmilla ever ask for or receive help for her mental struggles? It seems unlikely. What does Jagan's character represent in Kala? Jagan, played expertly by Babul Khan, the son of the late actor Irfan Khan, represents the raw talent that exists in every entertainment industry. Jagan's talent is described in the film as somewhat divine, and he has a genuine connection to music. This scene is Jagan's introductory scene and epitomizes this by the use of light. When Jagan begins singing, a ray of light is focused directly on him, indicating his divine talent, seemingly as if he is touched by the gods themselves. Kala, however, represents nepotism. Although talented in her own way, Kala is from a musical background. We are told as an audience that her father has a great musical legacy. Jagan and Kala come from completely different worlds and find themselves in a symbolic and literal maze in the story. The intricate nature of their relationship is represented in the maze. We see Jagan approach Kala for the first time at her childhood home and embrace her in the outside courtyard when she is distraught by his arrival. This image of both characters, Jagan and Kala, in the maze courtyard is significant, representing the many intricate and complicated passages that their characters go through in this story as a result of their lives being intertwined. The maze symbol is built on further with the toy that Kala uses to change the course of Jagan's destiny. Although writer and director of Kala, Anivita Dutt, has not outright confirmed that she based the character of Jagan on a real person, the parallels between Jagan and the real-life tragic story of the 14-year-old ghazal singer Master Madan is uncanny. Master Madan, also known as the Ghazal King, was born in pre-independence India on December 28, 1927. He was a child prodigy and rose to fame when he was just 3.5 years old. During his life, he recorded only 8 songs in total, but it is his tragic death at the age of 14 that is noteworthy in relation to this film, Kala. By the age of 14, Master Madan was extremely popular. After winning a cash prize for a performance in Kolkata, he returned to Delhi, falling sick due to a mild fever. He then traveled to Shimla, where it was reported that he died, allegedly due to his milk being poisoned by fellow singers who were jealous of his success. Officially, Master Madan died on the 5th of June 1942 due to an apparent mercury poisoning. This draws a direct parallel with how the story of Kala and Jagan unfolds. In the opening scenes of Kala, we see her surrounded by photojournalists, but she specifically gestures to the only female photographer in the room to take her picture. Although writer and director of Kala, Anivita Dutt, has not confirmed it, it seems that the character of the photographer is based on the real-life first female photographer of India named Homai Vyarawalla. She was born in 1913 and was India's first female photojournalist. She began her career in 1938 working for the Bombay Chronicle and was a pioneer in her field for women. Most of her black and white images were published in the mainstream publication The Illustrated Weekly of India, and she received the second highest civilian award of the Republic of India. She once stated in an interview that because women were not taken seriously as journalists, she was able to take high-quality, revealing photographs of her subjects without any interference. Most of her photographs were published under a pseudonym, Dalda 13. She also photographed important political leaders and events of the time, and this included Indira Gandhi, India's first female prime minister. Interestingly, this was referred to in a conversation between Kala and the female journalist in the film.
Approval ke liye.
Thank you. By the way, I loved the one you did for Indira last week.
Oh, thank you. Ta-ta then.
Ta-ta.
In the introductory scenes to Kala, it initially seems that she has it all. She has just won the golden vinyl and seems to be on an upward track to the peak of her success. But as an audience, we soon realize that there are more layers to Kala's story. Kala is struggling mentally and her psyche is extremely fragile. Possibly the most heartbreaking insight into the abuse that Qala experienced at the hands of her mother as a child is this scene. In this scene, Qala is undergoing her musical training but makes an error. Urmilla, her mother, approaches her calmly, and yet we as an audience visibly notice that Qala flinches when her mother approaches her, a sign of possible physical abuse. We then witness a simple yet horrifying punishment, with Urmilla literally and figuratively locking Qala outside in the harsh and cold winter as punishment for her error. Qala, a young girl, is left to beg her mother to let her back inside the house, promising that she will learn her music. Ultimately, Qala makes the assumption in a desperate attempt that the only way that she can possibly obtain the love and validation of her mother is through singing. And she does just that at the end of this scene. This scene is the epitome of Qala's relationship with her mother. Qala, at its core, is an Indian film about mental health and trauma. As Qala's trauma plays out before our eyes, her character is molded from an insecure, frightened, and jealous child to a young person who is even more mentally fragile, fractured, and constantly seeking the approval of a figuratively and literally distant mother. As an audience, we are aware that Qala is plagued mentally by some incident in her past, and as the film builds the story around her dark childhood, we never truly know the details of her trauma until the end of the film. But it is through the hallucinations and visual representation of Qala's mental health decline that we as an audience gain insight into her mental state. Let us discuss them all. Anivita Dutt uses a creative approach in this film to depict the deep loneliness, suffering, and mental anguish of her main character, Qala. In Qala, we notice that whenever she has a mentally distressing moment, it starts snowing around her, and she feels colder. This ties in with the snow and coldness of her childhood home, where she experienced her abuse and trauma. So in this way, when Qala experiences a mentally distressing moment or even a mental breakdown, we as an audience are seeing the visual representation of what is happening in her mind. This film is a psychological horror, and Qala's fragile mental state is depicted through this falling snow and the cold that she feels. Another creative symbol used to depict Qala's mental framework are moths. She first sees a moth on Jagan's corpse, and the unbearable guilt and heightened shame that she feels when Jagan comes to her mind is represented by the moth. We see the moth symbol placed everywhere in the life of Qala. You have to simply look for it. On her outfits, her saris, her earrings, in her home, even in the opening credits and title. The moth symbol is everywhere. I theorize that this moth symbol indicates that Qala's mental anguish is always with her, irrespective of where she is and how far she goes. A fascinating scene which builds on the symbolism of the moth is this particular scene, which I call the metamorphosis dance scene. Just before the metamorphosis dance scene occurs, we see an exchange between Qala and her mother, in which her mother informs her that she is to get married and live with her new husband. This is shocking news to Qala, and she asks if she could still stay with her, with Urmilla saying no. Qala then, desperate not to get married and leave her home, suggests that she marries Jagan. Her mother becomes disgusted by the idea, as she has effectively placed Jagan in the role of her son. This exchange deeply disturbs Qala, and the following scenes represent a dark change in her. We see dancers with glamorous outfits and feathers move around Qala, signifying a change or metamorphosis of her. Their final pose behind Qala indicates that Qala herself has changed. The darkness of her character has come to the fore. And this is the moment that she commits the most evil act. The moth in literature is associated with death, darkness, and bad omens. The reason for this dark association is because moths are known for their flight towards open flames, which result in their death. And this is in fact parallel to how Qala's own story unfolds. In films, paying attention to the books that the characters read offers a fascinating insight into their character. Qala is found in this scene reading the original 1886 novel titled The Strange Case of Dr Jekyll and Mr Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson. This book and reference is well known in pop culture. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is a famous Gothic novel. Dr. Jekyll, a kind and well-respected scientist, meddles with the dark side of science and does this by transforming himself into Mr. Hyde, his evil alter ego who doesn't accept responsibility for his evil ways. This book is so famous that the characters Jekyll and Hyde have become synonymous with multiple personality disorder. This book provides perfect symbolism when placed in Qala's world. As an audience, we never truly know the exact details of Qala's mental illnesses. We do, however, see her depression, loneliness, anxiety, abandonment, and hallucinations. However, it is in this particular scene that we realize that Qala's mental illness is even more foregone than we could imagine. It shows us the two sides of Qala and her mental state. One, a fragile and tormented young woman, and the other, a much more sinister figure.
मेरी आवाज़ मेरा सब कुछ थी। मेरी फिल्म, मेरे ख्वाब, जो अब तू जी रही है, खुश है।
The mood, color grading, visual effects, and richness to detail contribute to the overall melancholy of this film. However, what this film also highlights is the lack of seriousness regarding women's mental health struggles which exist even today. Qala mentions numerous times in the film to her mother over the phone that something is wrong. We also see that she sleeps often and there are sleeping pills near her bed, and that people around her notice that something is wrong. However, it is this scene that illustrates Qala's struggle in obtaining help for her mental health. Qala vocalizes her mental and physical anguish, but her doctor simply dismisses her.
जैसे कुछ टूट रहा है।
I think you need a break. Exhaustion हो गया।
Exhaustion नहीं डॉक्टर। There is something wrong with me.
अरे कुछ नहीं है, ये लेडीज लोगों में होता है, नॉर्मल है। आप इतने अच्छे आर्टिस्ट हैं और आर्टिस्ट लोग थोड़े ज्यादा सेंसिटिव होते हैं, वो हर चीज दिल में छू जाती है, बातें सोचने लगते हैं, इसलिए शोर वगैरह। ऊपर से आप लोगों का वो महीने में कुछ दिन ज्यादा तकलीफदायक भी होती है। तो आप एक काम कीजिए, आप कहीं बाहर घूमने जाइए। हाँ, ठीक है।
तो फिर आप नींद की गोलियां भिजवा दीजिए।
ये पिछले महीने भिजवाई थी ना?
वही बची है।
नहीं कला जी, आप ना वैसे ही सोने की कोशिश कीजिए, ठीक है? आप एक काम करो, इनको ना गर्म दूध में
नहीं, दीदी दूध नहीं पीती।
अच्छा तो ठीक है, आप गर्म पानी में जायफल मिलाकर
आप बस गोलियां भिजवा दीजिए।
आप सोचना बंद कीजिए, ज्यादा सोच रही हैं आप। इतनी अच्छी गायिका हैं, गाइए।
As the title of the film and the name of the main character, Qala directly translates to English as art. This is such a fitting name for such an aesthetically beautiful film in which every frame is a work of art. Also, Qala herself is an artist as a musician, and she creates her own art through singing in the film. Furthermore, art is always open to interpretation, and in the same way that Qala is beautiful, there are many deeper and darker interpretations in this film. Writer and director Anivita Dutt has stated in various interviews that she calls Qala's childhood home the house of oppression. This reference is quite clear when observing the environmental surroundings being cold and brutal. And of course, the childhood home or the house of oppression is where Qala experienced her abuse. Qala's childhood home is filled with Victorian Gothic architecture. It is filled with darkness, art, and architecture of a bygone era. However, Anivita Dutt refers to Qala's adulthood home as the house of delirium. Delirium refers to a disturbed state of mind or conscious characterized by symptoms such as confusion, disorientation, and hallucinations. There are beautiful mirrors, wallpapers, and chandeliers in Qala's adult home, reflecting important symbols from the film. But this adulthood home is just as unwelcoming in its own way. Gargoyles appear twice in the film to mark Sumant Kumar's entry and exit. Anivita Dutt has confirmed that these gargoyles are almost as a warning of the monster in plain sight. Qala also discusses an important issue of how men in power abuse that power, especially in the entertainment industry, at the expense of women. In this scene in Qala, there is a reference to Shakespeare's Macbeth. In the play Macbeth, Lady Macbeth's constant hand washing is dramatic irony because she in the play is washing her hands, but we as an audience knows that she is trying to wash away the metaphorical blood from her involvement and guilt relating to the king's death. This is the quote from the play that encapsulates this. In Qala, she, like Lady Macbeth, is overwhelmed by her feelings of guilt relating to her involvement in Jagan's death, and it is not blood but mercury that Qala desperately tries to wash away. Qala is one of the most visually beautiful films to exist in Bollywood, and through the aesthetic it explores psychological trauma and dark subjects unlike any other film. It is a compelling story with brilliant performances by its actors, and the writer and director Anivita Dutt has confirmed that every detail in Qala does not happen by accident or coincidence. Anivita Dutt is a thoughtful writer and director and possibly one of the most significant visionary directors in Indian cinema today. The soundtrack is equally praiseworthy. It is a film unlike any other. What did you think of Qala? Let me know in the comments below, and subscribe to this channel for more book reviews, film analysis, and aesthetic content.